Wake up your morning in a brand new way with the positive people, places, events, and things in and around your neighborhood and around the world. No matter where you live, your mornings are about to get better. It's the refreshing way to start your day. No doom or gloom, just bright sunshine no matter what the weather. Metro Magazine with Bonnie McDaniel. Inspiring, informative, intelligent, Ion. Positively the best way to start your morning.
I'm Bonnie McDaniel and welcome to Metro Magazine. You are absolutely going to love our guest this morning. There are some women out there who imagine things, they see things that are wrong, and they only think about it. Our guest this morning is someone who saw a problem and she decided, you know what, I'm going to take this head on. Ludy Green is known in the congressional area. She is actually the person who is responsible for crafting a bill against domestic violence against women. And she's going to tell you about her amazing journey to getting there. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Ludy Green. Ludy, welcome to Metro Magazine.
Bonnie, thank you so much for this kind invitation. I'm just thrilled to be here with you.
And we're glad to have you here. And the way I normally like to start this out, because I like people to know who the person is. The work is what you do. There's a lot more that goes into having people do the kind of things that they do in life. So if we can start out talking about your background in terms of where you grew up and all of those kinds of things, if you'd like to share. Now, I understand, I think I read you were from South America, born to an American citizen. So you wanted to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can share a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
I was born in South America. I spent most of my youth here in America because my mother's family, they're from here, from Chicago area.
Okay.
And
so you're from Chi-Town?
Yeah, Illinois, it's Skokie area. So basically, most of my life I was overseas. I spent a lot of time in Europe, and I grew up in a political and diplomatic family, by which I learned a lot of things that really served me well now, when I came to America and I started working with this violence against women.
Okay. Now, you said you grew up in a political family. Were your parents politicians or
my grandfather?
Your grandfather. You want to talk a little bit about him?
He was a long-life senator, and then my father was a lawyer. We come from 6 generations of lawyers.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And are you the only child, or do you have
Yes.
siblings? Okay. Oh, wow. So what was that like growing up? Because when I look at your resume and I see all of the amazing things you've done, was your grandfather your greatest influence, or were there other people in your family who influenced you?
You know, I had great influences. One of the biggest influences was an aunt that she just passed away. She lived with us until she was in her late 90s.
Wow.
And this is a woman who was self-made and a woman with dreams, and in a country where basically there were no chances for women, and she worked her way up in government there in the Nations Bank of Peru, which I was just so thrilled to be under her wing. And in her little ways, in her loving ways, she showed me a lot of things that I was able to apply in my life.
What was the greatest lesson you think you learned from her?
Hard work, belief, and trust in God.
A good lesson, a good lesson. One that I think a lot of our young women could certainly benefit from. Now, when we were talking off camera, talking about young women, you also shared that you have five young women that you're currently mentoring. Talk to us about mentorship and why that's important.
Yes, I feel that, in this I'm going to go back to my Aunt Melba, which is like the person who gave me this whole idea. She said, Ludy, it's time for you. You have gotten so many mentors that have taught you in your life, like including her. And she said, I think that it's time. About 3 years ago, she told me that I think it's time for you to start giving all that knowledge and all that wisdom that God has put it in your life.
Wow.
And now pass it into the next generations. It is your time. You have the energy, and you like working with young women. Your daughter is going to college, so put that on practice. And I'm telling you, I am just thrilled and happy to do this.
And you know what I've learned, because I was also sharing with you that I also mentor and have done for a long time, because very much like your aunt, I learned that from my grandmother, the importance of giving to other people. I will say that, and I don't know if you find this to be the case, when I am giving my time and sharing my knowledge, I feel like I'm getting more than I'm giving. Is that the case with you?
I totally agree with you. It's the most rewarding experience because you are giving yourself to others and you're seeing the results. What better than that?
And I call it, you know, what I say to people all the time, it's nothing sadder than to see someone who lives within themselves all the time, and that's their, you know, their way of dealing with the world. It's everything is inside them. It's when you give it back that it really multiplies. Now let's talk a little bit about your education, your educational background.
Of course.
You said you lived in different places around the country. Were you educated here in the United States?
I went to George Washington University where I got my education, you know, from my undergrad, my master's degree, human resources management, and then a doctorate in industrial organization psychology. And then I have a long years of work that I have done in human resources, which was my background. So I did work in the government. I also work in international organizations as well as in the private sector.
Okay.
And grew my career.
Okay. What was it about human resources you think that caused you to want to study in that field?
It's very interesting. You know, I never planned to do human resources. My background was in international finance, my undergrad.
Okay.
But my life what brought me to it. It's so interesting.
So why don't you share that story?
Never even planned it. So basically, when I was interning in Congress, I started volunteering on a shelter for battered women called My Sister's Place in Washington, D.C. And there, by volunteering, I got exposed to women. I started doing, you know, interviews and learning about the job postings and trying to find jobs for them. But I was very early in my life. I was just after my undergrad, and then I had to take then a master's. So basically, when the time came to the master's degree, I had a professor who was counseling me about it, and he said, listen, it seems that you're very interested in helping others, and there's a program, human resources. He was the head of this program, human resource management at GW, and he said, why don't you consider that? And also, it seems like at my work where I was then, you know, I was working with the World Bank, and basically, I was doing a lot of intakes and interviews when I went overseas. I screened like secretaries, and everything was going to that line of, you know, business. And I got curious, so I applied to the program and got in.
What was you said My Sister's Place? What was the purpose of that program? If you could go in depth a little bit more.
It is a shelter for battered women.
Is that still in existence?
It's still existence, yes. And they're my partners now with my organization, and I'm talking about 1988. That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And basically, this group served me to basically see the need in the community, the importance of employment, because they had a shelter. You have a place where the women, the victims of violence, were there, and then I started thinking, oh, but employment—that's a key solution for them. You know, economic empowerment, and that's what my whole story about comes.
Okay, and I read someplace that there was a point of frustration when you were working for My Sister's Place, and talk about that frustration and what propelled you to take your work even further.
Yes, one of the things was, I started meeting and getting to know the clients, the victims, and they were sharing about, they felt like they couldn't get out of the bed, they didn't know what to do with the children, and they didn't know what to do. They had to go back to the abusers because they're the one maintaining them. Or if not, they come back to the shelter. It was back and forth. Then in My Sister's Place, at that time, not now, but then, they were like postage on the walls of job postings, right? That was that in the old times. We're talking about over 20 years. So how would you imagine a woman who's going through that type of situation, even look on the wall? And then how do you get there? How do you contact the employer? It's so many steps. So through the years in my experience there, I said, well, there has to be a solution. We can't leave it like that. We have to make something easier for these victims and give like an open door for them so they can be able to get in an easier, in a smoother way. So by using my skills, my networking of my friends, who they were at that time when I created this organization, Second Chances, then I use it all together, and I say, well, this is the way to do it. We create an employment agency for them. We work together with the shelter, so the shelter got the housing, and we do the employment for them.
You bring up an interesting point, because one of the things that I am a huge proponent of is sharing of resources, and it's one of the reasons I want, among many reasons, I wanted to do this series, because I am of the opinion that everything that women need to be empowered, we already own. And we become powerful and empowered when we know how to network and connect the dots. And that's something I want you to talk a little bit more about, because you bring up an interesting point in talking about using your network of people. Talk about that a little bit, and how you went about doing that.
Yes, it is very important, the way the relationships you build, and everyone in the community play a big part. No one understands. Everybody thinks, you take for granted somebody that may be working, I don't know, in a coffee shop. Maybe someone that is working, I don't know, just parking your car. Let me tell you, I have gotten clients like that. We have gotten resources from it. From places that I go and get my sandwiches, I have been able to employ women who were there basically on the streets. Your bank, you don't know. I mean, this networking is key. Be good to others. Be there for others. And and communicate with one another in the community. Building your community for yourself and for others is the best thing you can do.
It's interesting. You bring up a point. I'm remembering back when I was in my corporate days, and when I entered into that field, there were not a lot of women. I was in technology, and when I first entered, it was me. It was myself, another woman who had been there a couple of years, and all guys. And when I went in, I hit the ground running. I was immediately successful. And they could never understand why, because a lot of these guys, some of them had come from IBM. I mean, I had a business degree, but I really didn't have the background. And one day my boss asked me, he said, Bonnie, he says, I don't understand, and he started talking about the experience the guys had. I said, the thing I've learned, I said that most people undervalue paying attention to people and being kind to people. And I said, you take the average guy, at least in my experience, they'll walk into a building and you have someone who's sweeping the floor. They walk right past that person and don't pay attention to them. The person who takes out the trash can probably tell you everything that happens within an organization. So saying good morning to them is probably a benefit. And I love the fact that you bring up the importance of networking and paying attention to the people that are around you. No one is without value, and I really am glad you brought that up. So if we can talk about then, talk a little bit further about, so you're networking with the people within your community, and you're working for my sister's place?
No, I was a volunteer there.
You were a volunteer there.
I was working with a congressman
You're working
at
with
that time.
And volunteering. How were you able to take that and parlay it into something that you then were able to see results within the community? Because again, you were talking about the frustration of, you have a job placement center and something's amiss. Talk about how you were able to connect the dots.
So basically, by being a community activist, by working and volunteering in the community like I did on the Shelter for Battered Women, and having my job at the same time. I always worked. I had a full-time job, but at the same time, I always gave myself to the community. So I work in the shelters. I've worked in the shelters for years and years and years. You build, friendships. You build network. So I started doing that. So when I moved, I was there in the District of Columbia. Then I moved to Arlington, Virginia. I built also relationships in Arlington. Got more. The network started growing more. Then I started doing more things. Like I did mentorships. At that time, it was for disadvantaged youth in a place called back then, Arna Valley, which doesn't even exist in Arlington, South Arlington. So there were a lot of areas that I started spreading myself, going and speaking, involved. So then when the time came of the organization, by that time I already have grown in my career. I got already my master's degree. I was working in a great position. I was in a company called Smith Buckland and Associates. It's a management consulting firm. And
what was your focus? You said management consulting. Were you focused in human resources?
I was in human resources, and I was working in the area of recruitment. I was a director of recruitment in that association management firm. So basically, by doing that, I got more exposure, more people, more resources. So then I started thinking really seriously about how I'm building this organization. So to the friends I had in my, with my group, we start talking already. And then after that Smith Buckland experience, I got a position of director of human resources in a larger firm. It was a very large international association firm for women, which empowering women. Then I took it even further seriously, and I called the Library of Congress, a friend of mine who was working there. She was like director of research, something like that. She did a research for me to find out if there was any employment agency in the country for victims of violence. So that was key for me. So by then I had network in the area. I had already the shelters. I have friends of mine who they were in the field of human resources. I was part of the Society of Human Resource Management. I have been a community activist. I already have served one of the governors of Virginia on a board. So I was growing.
You really had building the framework for it. Okay.
But then I realized, okay, I have the shelters that can be my partner, where I can get the victims from there. I can talk to Department of Social Services, faith-based organizations like my church, and synagogues and groups like that, and invite them to be part of this. And then I can contact some of my friends and ask them if they can become my partners.
Now, it's interesting you bring up, you talk about the faith-based organizations, because I think that's critical in that a lot of times when women are battered, the church is the first place they'll go.
Correct.
So talk about that partnership with them and how you were able to work that and the things that you were doing.
Yes. By that time, I was very involved with a church called the Falls Episcopal Church at Reverend Yates, and that's the church of mine and my family. And basically, I joined partnership with them, and they were going to refer the clients that they had, that they were victims of violence, to us on the, in providing them employment at the time. Many women come, even very highly educated women who come from those backgrounds, and they basically feel like they don't have nowhere to go. So they needed a resource like ours. And I started partnering with that church first, and then we move on to another, to another, to another.
So you connected to churches all over the area?
All over the area, and right now nationally, we are very involved with a lot of groups. We grew. I mean, we were very small, and then we started expanding, and we have other sites in other states. So basically, we started with that. So the churches, Department of Social Services, the faith-based organizations, another nonprofits. Who else do we have partnerships with? And of course, the Shelters for Battered Women. So we signed memorandum of understanding by which they let us, get their clients, and they assure us that they're victims of violence. So we have to have that background. That is key, because that's the population that we serve. That's our niche. So, and then on the other side, I had to sign the job partners. That was key. And how am I going to go and employ, just go and call anyone? You can't. It's very difficult. So I called my girlfriends, and we got 40 of my friends who they became my job partners.
And these are your girlfriends. Are these professional?
All professional, directors of human resources, directors of recruitment, vice president of human resources. So very high, profile women who they decide to be part of this whole idea, this concept of 14 years ago now. And then
and I noticed some of the people that you're working with, we're talking about very high profile. IBM, one of the accounting firms, I can't remember which one it was now, I saw listed.
Maybe which one?
Booz Allen. Booz Allen,
yes.
yeah.
Betty Townsend from there, she's very helpful with Booz Allen and Hamilton. I mean, we have amazing firms that they're behind us, and they're really one-on-one with these clients. It's amazing, the commitment.
Wow. I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
So basically from that, we signed the partnerships with all of these people who they decide to be the job partners. What does it entail to be a job partner? A job partner is the one that commits to basically let us know when the job opening comes, right? Then from there, give us opportunities for women who they're qualified on those particular skills to come and interview and give them first opportunity than others.
Now, I think what you're doing is so important, especially when you think about the stigma that's attached to women who are who are victims of domestic violence. Talk to me about what kind of protection or things like that are you putting in place? Because that's, I would imagine, a big hurdle that you have to overcome when you're talking to a company about, this person has come out of an abusive situation. What's the conversation like?
The conversation is a little different. We don't come like that. We put women financially at risk. They are at risk. And then we go with a conversation and we explain where they're coming from.
Right.
But you have to have first a partnership, with them, and then try to sell it. And also the way we sell it too is through other partners. The other partners talks about us and tell them. So the first commitment of my 40 friends were the greatest open opportunity, and making it easier for us. But now, it's much simpler than before, because let me tell you, for us to obtain even an office space was the most difficult thing we did. It was over 6 months. We had the money. We could get any place to have our organization. Everyone told us no.
What's the fear, especially if you're a leasing agent, you have a building, you need to fill it up. What kinds of
well, they came to me and they said, well, these are homeless people. How are we going to come? And the presence of them will not be well received. Our other tenants will be disturbed. All these type of conversations I had.
Wow. And you bring up another part of the population where it's unfortunate that they're also stigmatized talking about homelessness, which, yes, it does happen to women and women with children who are leaving a bad situation. Of course, being homeless is part of what happens when you walk away from a bad situation. So talk to me then about how were you able to overcome that in terms of getting them to finally lease?
Let me tell you, after over 6 months, I was just very disturbed, and I'm like almost giving up. And I couldn't do an organization from my house. It was not even doable. This is something serious. I wanted to make it like a nonprofit, sort of like with a corporate feel to it. So it will be like an employment agency where people will come in. It will be like no one will really know who is the victim and who's not, because we have volunteers. And it was a lot of ideas in my mind. So I keep walking the streets, basically walking the streets, so they see knocking doors, until I ended up with this little office space. I got upstairs because somebody else told me, they said, it seems like somebody's subleasing. And I am so blessed. I found this amazing man who had a small little shop of a PR firm. His name is Kirk Monroe, an amazing individual who he sat down with me. And you know what? Thanks to that man, I am here today, and I can tell that we have advanced the women's rights and helped these victims of violence. I mean, it was just a moment of that. I knew God was present, And
it's so, you're so right in the fact that none of us get anywhere without the support of other people. And he, for you, was an angel. Because,
he was.
Yeah. But you never encounter those angels until you get out there and do what you did, which is hit the pavement and walk and ask and say to someone, I need your help. And on that note, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about your work and the Domestic Violence Act that you were able to, I would say single-handedly, because I don't think I'd ever say no to you ladies. So we're going to be right back in a minute with more Metro Magazine.
Up to 40% of businesses never recover after experiencing a major disaster. Make a plan at ready.gov/business.
When you throw away money on wasted electricity, you're throwing away everything you could have bought with it. Saving energy saves you money.
If you're just joining us, we're here with Ludy Green, who has been sharing her amazing story about her work in support of women who are victims of domestic violence. But there are so many other elements to what you're doing. So if we can continue our conversation, I am so fascinated with you.
Oh, thanks.
So we were talking a little bit off camera about another organization that you're just starting. I don't know if we're getting too far ahead of ourselves, but if you could share just a moment, because I want to make a point about a for-profit organization you're just... Of course.
Okay. Yeah, so during the down economy, about 2000 and start coming down 2007, 2008, I felt that there was a need of creating something that would produce the monies that we needed for the expansion of the organization. So I created a company called Women Power Incorporated. It's a human resources firm that also provides executive coaching, which is the second part of the organization, because I felt that I had the skills and the abilities to help people. Like in the executive coaching area, you can provide leadership, conflict resolution, which is some of the areas that I love, and I feel that I can, be of help to others.
Is this now you talk about executive coaching, is this something that you are handling, or are you bringing other women into the organization to provide some of the services?
Yes,
because you're one person.
Correct. What I do is I subcontract to people to do the work, and basically I, watch. But I also give them the tools, the skills, and the different things they may need on giving the service right.
Okay.
So basically this organization help us provide the monies for the expansion of second chances. So basically, through this organization, we're able to have the monies, and there's a percentage of that goes to second chance. So it helps when there's needs of money. You can provide more to your nonprofit if you have a for-profit on the side.
And you know what? And I love the fact that you're doing that, because I run into a lot of young women and some mature women who want to do good in the community. I'm myself being one of them. But you have to come to the realization at some point that although you have something great to offer, that the world really does go round with money.
Correct.
I was reading the story of Mother Teresa, even. I mean, she's one of the greatest philanthropists that's ever lived. And one of the things that she was very certain about, I get out here and I feed the babies and I make sure that, the homeless are taken care of. But guess what? I need you to give so that there's food. We're able to purchase the food and buy the clothes and all of that. So I'm glad you brought that up, because monetizing your work is extremely important, which a lot of women, because we are, I think, by nature givers, have a big problem in trying to do that. So I'm glad you brought that one point up. There was another point that I wanted you to share a little bit more about. You talked about your getting your organization started to provide career services and whatnot. How difficult, you're in your office, you've found, you're able to lease the space. Now, what was the next step? How difficult was it to get you engaged? Because I'm sure you had to bring in an assistant and other people like that because of the stigma. People sometimes are afraid. So talk about that process.
So basically, I was able to save for 10 years money from my side. I saved some seed money, as well as I received some seed money from other groups like American Online, and the other one was Capital One. So I have a little amount of good little money that helped me to the startup. For at least I had covered like a whole year of rent, and then also to be able to get an assistant, someone that can help me, on a day-to-day basis.
So that financial background came in handy.
Oh yeah, that was really key. I mean, I really created my budget, the business, but all the things that had to be on place before I could start something like that. Serious, because it's serving victims of violence, bringing them in. You have all their background. It's very, it can be very dangerous, because you don't know if the person who is, abusing them may come here and do something in the office. So there's so many details around this whole employment agency that we needed to take care of.
And you talk about the downside of people who are in situations like that. I was also beginning to share with you that a few years back, I was privy to, or I knew someone who was a victim, a woman who was very successful, she and her husband both. And it's interesting how sometimes it's a little thing that can just send someone over the top. I don't know her personal life. I didn't know her personal life in terms of maybe there were some other instances pushing and maybe hitting, but not to the point of where it was a lot of abuse. But he lost a job. And that kind of pushed him over the edge because of the things that I guess people go through. And the situation did become abusive. And I want to tell this story because I want to ask you a question. But again, very high profile people. And she had moved here from Princeton to the DC area. And when the situation became abusive, she went back home to her family. She had children. They were both involved in the church, and he lured her back to come, and he said, we'll meet someplace neutral, which a church seems like a very safe place to be. Unfortunately, she was walking up the steps to the church to come in, and he was there at the top of the steps, and he had come and he came to kill her, and he took her life on the steps of the church. And I think it's those stories that make people afraid.
Yes.
Make them afraid. I remember even my sister, years and years ago, her first husband, he was abusive, and my husband and I had to spear her away from a very abusive situation because he would have killed her. And luckily, she was able to survive. That's been many, many years, and she's not threatened by him anymore. But it's real. When you think about situations that people find themselves in. And I guess the question I want to ask you is how do you manage that? Because it is a real threat. How do you manage that with the people you work with?
But first of all, don't forget that all the women who come to us, they come already referrals from the shelters. They come from the shelters when they're already ready to work. So the shelter is the one that takes all the heat. That's the most difficult part, when they arrive there and they're basically, lost and they don't know what to do. So the shelters take all that responsibility. When they're ready to work, then they call us and say, now we need to find out what we're going to do. Because then they're going to transitional housing, and then after transitional housing, what there is for them. So basically, this is where we are for them. there have been many circumstances by which women, they have come directly to us, but it's very unusual. It's not like a commonly, because we're just an employment agency for them. But it's still, we have had situations where we have received threats.
Wow.
Oh yes, we have had to call the office where they were working, and and discuss with their managers and make them aware about the situation. So it is really dangerous. It is not easy. We have done our best. We work with the police department. We work with lawyers. We have a few law firms that they support us pro bono. Then we have doctors.
So you have an element of protection in place for the women that come to you.
Okay, we do.
Okay. And was it difficult for you to get the police officers to cooperate with you? Although, again, as I said, we were going to break. I don't think I want to say no to you. You're a little ball of fire.
Basically, no. We were very blessed because they get engaged. They get to know our clients. They come like to our office like it's their home. So we all learn about one another. People who even now they're working, they stop by to the office and let people know, say hello, how they're doing. Even they want to volunteer and help us. So
I was about to ask you, do you have a lot of the women who you have helped who are now paying it forward for the women who are coming into into situations?
Not a lot. I wouldn't say that, which I would have loved to have that, because many of them, they want to forget. And I understand that. They want to start their life as anew. So I just let them do whatever they want to do. And if they're willing to share, they share their stories. We have a lot of people who are spokespeople for us. But we have some of them where they work, they will let us know. They will send us an email or a phone call. I found a position. There is something.
Okay, so they're paying for it, but in a different way.
In a different way,
that's wonderful.
Which is great.
Yeah. Have you had instances, because you've been doing this for a while, where, because very often you'll find people who are it's generational, people who are in domestic and violent situations, the daughter or the son see this, and for whatever the reason, they are affected by it, and either the daughter then puts herself in a situation where she's abused, or the male becomes an abuser. Have you had situations like that?
Yes, indeed, because these are behaviors learned.
Yes.
People need to understand that you will learn at home whatever you see. Not everyone will do it, but a lot of percentage of individuals will repeat that behavior and will do it when they're going to a distress situation, will do whatever they saw with a mom or their father.
Do you have programs or partnerships with people who are able to provide counseling for the young people and
we
for
do.
the mom? Good.
We're very lucky. We have a wonderful network of doctors, like I mentioned before. We have psychiatrists, psychologists, plastic surgeons, dentists, people in the community who have helped us in situations that we couldn't address ourselves with the victims. So it is key. Even though we're an employment agency, just that, we still need that community, network, because if something comes up and then we cannot solve the problem at the moment, those women, they need it. So that's why.
And you know what, although you are in the area of domestic violence, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you talk about the various connections and the networking you've done. What you do should really be a model for how we need to connect. And I'm focused on women as women, so that we can get the things done that we need to get done every day. I just think you're just an amazing person who has a lot of insight as to how community, because that's what we are, we're parts of community, how community works. So if you want to now, because I really want to talk about how you were able to, I think you're amazing in terms of getting this Domestic Violence Act, pushing that forward. Tell us the story about how that happened.
Well, basically, it has been very frustrating for us, particularly that Congress and no one was really understanding why it was important, the financial part. And for us, we've seen in one-on-one that when these women got their jobs, we're proving and testing the programs that they really work successfully by proving that they find long-term careers, and they get good money and they become successful, and they don't enter into this situation of domestic violence anymore. And they're not a burden to society anymore.
And that's what I wanted to bring up. It seems kind of crazy to me that they couldn't connect the dots in terms of, if we are able to help these women become gainfully employed, then we're not going to have to take care of them, which I'm sure you found a lot of situations where women were burdens, if you will, to society and to taxpayers. So
You touched something, taxpayers, and I should mention that it's $10 billion annual dollars expend on domestic violence.
Wow.
And nobody is aware. I mean, nobody talks about it. It's not something that everybody talks like every day. So if we're aware about that, and if we can help these women be employed in a company, even a 1% of the women, or 0.5, that they can get into a big company, which any big company can commit to that, to an organization like Second Chances, or another little Second Chances somewhere else, that somebody may want to do a little branch, recreate the same model like you're talking about, then you mind the amount of money will be saved to our community.
Exactly. You will save, but also they're contributors now to the tax base, so that we can expand services in other areas. They become, I call it being productive citizens. You're helping them to do that. So I'm sorry.
And then one of the things I'm doing is I just wrote a book. I finished my book, and my book is going to be published this spring. And the book talks about that, the model that anybody can create it anywhere in the country, because I can't do it myself, creating these Second Chances all over. We can do it little by little. We have a partnership with Manpower, which is a wonderful firm, but it still requires money, resources, and people who are committed. So in this book, it talks about the stories of the clients, but it also talks about the model of the organization that can be repeated, and it's open. And the name of the book, it is Ending Domestic Violence Captivity, A Guide to Economic Freedom.
Okay.
And it's done by Volcano Press, our publisher from San Francisco.
You were talking about this being a model. Are there other Ludys around the country? Or?
I am sure.
No, meaning that because you have a model that works.
Yes.
And I love to see things multiplied when the system has been proven, because I know at least a couple other people in this area who are trying to do things in the same arena, but
they can do it. I mean, you follow basically the steps in the book, which, because the whole model is there, you can repeat it. It's not complicated. And people, and you're talking about second chances, because people know us already in so many states. We're in New York City. We're in Ohio. We're in different states, in Los Angeles. So people know us.
Okay.
So that's making it easier to start up something like that.
Have you reached out to try to maybe some of the social services agencies to see who some of the people in LA or Chicago or other areas? Have you reached out to see?
Well, basically what we have done is we have started, with expansion. We have about 7 sites besides here in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So, they're like small sites, but is the service being provided, correct? So, but it's very slowly. It's like 14 years and we only have that amount of sites. But if any person that decides to create a new business, they create a little second chances, they not only have income for themselves, but they're also changing the life of victims of violence.
So are you basically here on the East Coast, or are you in different pockets around the country?
We have 7 sites besides Washington, D.C.
Okay, what are those sites?
The one in New York City started in 2005.
Okay.
Then we have Los Angeles.
Okay.
Then we have the one in Ohio. We have another a new project that we started in 2011 with Manpower, which is our new partner.
And they've been around. They're great. They've been around for a while.
Yeah, that's the largest employment agency in the world. And then we have one in Florida, and then we're missing one. There's one more. We're opening one in Greenwich. So, we're expanding. Greenwich.
Okay.
That's our next one. So we're expanding as much as we can. And right now, I keep talking with our partners and finding out where else are we going. So the whole goal of the book is basically my vision of the book is not only, it is basically going to be it is 100% goes to the proceeds to Second Chance, which is our great fundraising event this year. But at the same time, I see it more like the best investment will be that people will repeat the model, because the model is inside the book. So people can not only make their own income because they're recreating second chances for their own, it will be their own company, but also they will transform the lives of victims of violence.
Yeah.
What better way than that?
Wow.
And the map is on the book.
You were talking about your aunt who was a great influence on you, and the fact that she said you need to give back. I love the fact that what seems to be so interesting about yourself is that, as I said from the outset, you find ways to do things, but you think very big.
Oh, thanks.
You think big, and I like that. And sometimes when people think big, they think they need a lot of stuff. You figured out a way to take a model, put it in a book, and let other people make your big dream come true. And I love that. I love that because you're giving back in ways that I don't think you even realize. Because there are a lot of people out there who do want to give, who want to change the status quo and make domestic violence something that we don't deal with anymore. I doubt if it'll ever go away 100% because we're dealing with human beings.
Correct.
But we can certainly make an impact. So if we will have you talk a little bit more about how you were able to get Congress.
Oh, well, yeah, let's go
must
back to
have
that.
been
Let's go
fun.
back. That was really fun. Basically, I have an amazing law firm. It's called R&N Fox. They've been our pro bono lawyers, lobbyists since the start of the organization. They're so much believe in us and our mission, and they're behind us. So basically, we were dealing with this reauthorization, and nothing happened, and we really want the language of second chance inside. My vision and my board of directors' vision was that they will recognize that employment is a key to end domestic violence. It is a solution, and we want it there in the legislation. So we go and do these visits, myself with one of my assistants and my students. We go, like the three of us, and we ended up in the office of Senator Leahy. It was just like, those good luck moments. So I arrived there, and this guy who was one of the highest people dealing with the, justice and the legislation and all that, it really caught his attention. I was not even with the lobbyist firm. I was by myself with my two people. And he was like, can you tell me a little bit more? So he sent some of the staffers to the office and see how we operate and all that, how many years we operated. We talked to other people. They find out about our services. He was like, this thing, I'm sure that the senator will love that. So then he shared the organization to the senator. The senator loved it. Let's work together.
Wow.
So basically they gave me the whole Violence Against Women Act. Oh gosh, I'm like,
which had been sitting there forever.
let me tell you, and it's huge. And he said, well, okay, I want you to tell me, where do you think you should go? You kidding? And then I cannot ask the lobbyists because, they can help us, but they cannot go through all that. So myself with one of my board of directors, Judge Mark Kennedy, who's in Alabama, we go both of us, and I'm like reading and understanding, and I'm like, oh. And I came up with this idea, what about transitional housing? Why we don't put it inside transitional housing? Because that can be amazing. After transitional housing, where else do they go? They have to find employment, so let's put it that way. So
I love seeing you're very creative.
I don't even know how it got that, but they loved it. Then also, of course, you have to craft a language. It is involved. It is not that simple. You have to craft a language. So we sell it, and finally, it got approved. And then they reauthorized, and then everything was approved. We did not have any pushback, no problems. Instead of that, we got a lot of support, more people in Congress respecting our work, and we were featured in a lot of, yes, we were featured in a lot of areas, and even the National Journal got a great article about the work and, how we were part of this reauthorization.
I know there are not a lot of women who are on the Hill. What are there, like 20?
Yeah,
there's still
correct.
20 there, which is crazy, but we'll talk about that in another subject. But I wanted to ask you if there were any women who were able to lend a hand to help you along your way when the bill was being crafted.
During the bill, okay, 1 second. I got advice from Congresswoman Liana Roslettinen.
Okay.
She was one of that. What else? 1 second. I'm trying to remember. There was another one. There may be more from the law firm, but in Congress, she was the one.
She was the
particular
one.
one that I got some guidance from that because it takes a lot of efforts and time, but most of them were men, like helping us out and all that. But we had a nice group of people behind it and supporting and believing in it because they have been part of the organization too for years, including Vice President Biden. He was part of the organization. Senator Kerry, which Secretary Kerry now, he was part of our honorary council for years from the beginning.
I would think that Jill Biden would not let him not help because she's a woman who is also, she's someone that when I think about women, I'd love to interview. Not because she's the wife of the vice president, but because of the substance that I see in her and her compassion, for instance, and her passion rather for education, her compassion for other people. I'm sure there's a wonderful story there. But so you were able to get it pushed through, and what was that like?
Well, so for me, it was glorious. For all of us, we had a huge celebration. You know, all volunteers and people who were very involved with that. We had a huge, you know, there was a breakthrough, amazing. We didn't even think it was ever going to happen. And now, you know, it's the recognition. Right now, our organization is in a better stage. How? We are part of the whole solution for victims of violence, and a key solution.
Were you able to get any additional funding, or?
We will be getting funding, of course.
Okay, when is
the
that?
Violence against women. I will have to go through the cycles, you know, and apply, but we're part of that because now it's recognized. So in the legislation, it talks about
So
employment.
you're part of that grant process.
Yeah, because
now.
before we couldn't. How?
Okay.
It was impossible.
Okay, and in order for you to take advantage of that funding, because there's someone in my family very close to me who's part of the issuing of the grants that come through, you know, bills that are passed in Congress.
Right.
What kind of organization have you, I guess the question I want to ask, have you had to put together an organization to service the requirements for applying for the grants and all of that?
Yeah, okay. So basically you create a proposal.
Right.
And then you know, when from the government, you get these different proposals and then you just fill in the RFPs and then you say what, you know, you're going to provide. And then if it's that in the language that they're looking for, let's see, they're looking for, you know, training and employment, I don't know, 1,000 women or 500 women, then we can go for that. And you know.
I guess the question I'm really trying to ask you is, because before you were operating, I guess, from private funding,
private funding,
and contributions from people.
Yes.
And this is a totally different arena. And the question I'm asking you is, have you had to now formulate or put together another organization, because it's a whole different set of skills? Or have you been able to get people to contribute their skill set to be able to respond to the RFPs?
Well, we have a proposal writer.
Okay.
So we have people, you know, that help us in the organization.
Are there things that is this
proposal
something that
writers.
you need in terms, and that's what I'm trying to get to, people to contribute to you, your
Proposal
organization?
writers are amazing. Donors,
Okay.
Donors are always needed because we all have to look good. You get, I mean, when you get money from government, they want to see that there are donations from the private sector.
Exactly.
Companies, they need to be aligned with us. Individual donors, they have to be aligned, and money has to keep flowing. They are not going to go and give you $1 million if you're not getting the million from somewhere else. It's not going to happen.
So I again, what I'm trying to do is, if there are any of our viewers out there who
Yes.
have a passion for the work you're doing, I'm sure you will welcome any of
Yes.
their contributions, because there's some very talented women out there. I'm thinking of a couple off the top of my head,
Of course.
who I know are proposal writers who might be able to contribute.
When you throw away money on wasted electricity, you're throwing away everything you could have bought with it. Saving energy saves you money.
So Ludy, are there needs that you have within your organization? For instance, I know that there are a lot of women out there who might be able to help with proposal writing or research or any of those kinds of things that are needed to be able to respond to an RFP. Share with us, is there something that you need in
Proposal
particular?
writers are always needed because the fundraising part has to keep going. Then also we need PR people.
Okay.
That's a must, because right now our fundraising tool is the book. So the book has to be sold in 3 months, 6,000 copies minimum. We have to do that. It's sort of like our goal, and we want to make it happen.
And you know, there are
Social media experts.
social media, for
There you
sure.
go, somebody that can want to volunteer for at least for the 3 months of the book and make this book going, and television interviews that we need to have, you know, expose our board members. We have to keep going on this book and spread it all over and selling it.
Yeah, and so I want to also put an appeal out there. If there are any young women who are recent graduates with, say, degrees in PR, or are looking to enter into some of the things that you're doing, this is a great opportunity for them to be able to monetize. Monetizing something doesn't necessarily mean getting paid right away, but being able to look forward to see how
Correct.
that experience might pay off. And I think you would be a great name to put on a resume to say,
Thank
hey, we
you.
helped with this campaign. So if you're out there, this is Bonnie saying you need to give her a call, and she's going to give you information at the end as to how they can get in touch with you. They can get in touch with you. If we could talk a little bit more about, I read something about your being a U.S. delegate to Jordan and Syria. And I guess the question I have is this connected to the domestic violence? Speak a little bit more about that.
Yes, in 2009 I received a letter from the State Department invited me to be called the cultural ambassador of the United States on human trafficking and domestic violence against women. So basically that entailed to represent the United States and showing best practices in those countries. So I went there for a couple of weeks and stayed my time in Syria and then in Jordan, by which I presented with high officials, secretaries of justice, secretaries of labor. I went to universities and did a presentation on the best practices of how to combat human trafficking against women. Also, I share the work of Second Chance Employment Services with the purpose of one day someone will repeat the model to overseas.
Now, this is also, you mentioned the fact that you're doing this abroad. This is something that's very pervasive here in the United States. Human trafficking.
It is.
Are you involved stateside, or how's the connection made?
Well, our work with human trafficking victims started in 2004.
Okay.
After a few years, the Second Chance started. One of the organizations, the Sisters of Charity, referred one of the clients of human trafficking to our office. And that was our first experience with this type of situation and learning about it. So it's sort of combined. And when Manpower came to us, we partnered to be employers of victims of violence and human trafficking victims. So we cover that type of population too, as well.
Now, I know, and there's an introduction I want to make. I know that there are a lot of women who are involved in law enforcement, where this is a main focus because of the pervasiveness of this topic. Now, how are you able to impact through the work that you're doing for domestic violence? Because I would imagine that it really does spill over into some of the situations. How are you able to identify, if you will, if this might be going on with some of the women?
In the human trafficking area? Well, basically, you know, when you have worked with this type of populations and you understand the issue, you can even be curious, even when you go to the nail salon, and even when you talk with somebody overseas, you can figure it out that something is not right, something doesn't add up, or when something is right or wrong, or when somebody's lying or saying the truth. Because
you say the nail salon, you're talking about
some women who have been basically trafficked and they're working in nail salons overseas, or I don't know, here in the States, I haven't got the experience yet, but overseas, I've been able to see a few individuals.
Wow.
Are you dealing with that?
Because as I said before, I'm seeing more and more in the news where there are people being busted. And you also have, the thing that's also interesting is that I've seen a lot of women who are involved with men who are trafficking young girls. I think in Fairfax County I saw something in the news just last week where someone was arrested, and it was a woman who was involved.
Oh, indeed. You know, because it's money. You know, it's money, and these people are seeing the demands, and they're just, you know, using, you know, and they're not even care, or, you know, I don't know, they don't have any conscience. But for example, there have been also the problem of international organizations and embassies who they hire, you know, women from overseas, and they have them in their homes as housekeepers, and they're trafficked. How? They're not getting paid, they're withholding their information, their passports and all that, and they're hidden in those homes. And
wow.
that's the other areas that we have been, you know, working with.
Now, as far as where do you see Ludy Green? You have a new book coming out.
Yes.
You're hoping to have Ludy Greens planted around, scattered around the country. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? What would you like to see if you could just say, this is ideal for me?
My dream is that this organization really gets, you know, repeat. The Second Chances is all over the country because there is a solution to society. I can see it. I have tested the program. Other people have tested the program. It really works. Why not give a chance of women who they are on the streets and with no hope, and especially for those young children who they have to live through domestic violence. You know, they're our future generation.
They are. Now, is the startup, the process long? I mean, how do people reach out to you to say, hey, if they're watching this, I'd like to start a satellite, if you will, of Second Chances? How will they reach out to you?
Well, the way I'm thinking is, first of all, get the book. Understand, because I can imagine if everybody reached out to me, I wouldn't be able to cut myself in pieces. I can't wait
to read this book.
So in the book is the map. It tells you exactly how it is. Then after that, basically, it is so easy. It's like an ABC. It's not complicated. And we already have a name. The organization have a name. We are known. So everyone who you mentioned, that even you go to other states, I've gone to other states where people go and shake my hand and say, thank you for the work you do, your organization. So people getting to know us more and more every day.
Is this like a franchise?
It will become like a franchise, basically. It will become
so
like a
are people
franchise.
buying in, or are people coming in and the investment in what they're doing is coming from, private funding? How does that work?
They have to create the same model like us. We get that from private funding, we get from the government. And you see now we have government too. So it will be even easier for everyone, except that, for us at the beginning was hard. But now it will become much easier.
Okay, so
It's a repeat model.
If I could use, for instance, somebody recently that I was just talking to a few days ago, the American Heart Association, and I'm now partnered with them, but dealing with someone in Chicago. So it would be like that, where it is an organization that's fundraising in Chicago with the people in Chicago to provide services for the people in Chicago. So it's similar to, I guess, a situation like that.
Correct.
Where they're working under your umbrella, but they're operating autonomously.
Of their own, and it's their own. Correct.
Okay,
they become their
wonderful.
own independently and bringing solutions to society.
Wow. I knew when I saw your name, and I had actually met you, and I don't know why, I think I run around too much. I had seen you at a conference speaking for that organization, for which I was also doing a presentation. But I didn't really get to know you, again, talk about connections, until someone said, you need to interview Ludy Green. And when I read your background, lady, I can tell you I am really, really
Thank you so much, Bonnie.
honored to know you.
Thank you.
My heart goes out to you for the work that you're doing and have done, and the lives that you save for women who've come across your path. And I want to personally make an appeal that first of all, if you are a woman who is a victim of domestic violence, that you reach out to her. She's going to tell you how to get in touch. But also, if you're someone who knows someone, or if you are able to make a contribution to her efforts, because these are our mothers, our daughters, our future generations of children that are being affected by this. So I issue an appeal to you this morning that if you're able to financially contribute, that you would make it your business to make sure that you contribute to this fine organization. And if you would just take a moment and share with our viewers how they can get in touch with you, you can look into that camera right there and tell them.
Okay, you can call 202-331-7451, or you can call our 1-800 number, 1-888-331-7451, or you can go to our website, www.scesnet.org. Second Chance Employment Services. Thank you.
And also, be on the lookout for her book coming out in the spring. You know which one?
Ending Domestic Violence Captivity, a guide to economic freedom.
Okay. And when we get that, we're also going to try to put the title on at the end of the program so that people will know and go out and buy that book, because I'm sure you're going to be blessed. We have come to the end of another Metro Magazine. I'm so glad that you decided to stop in this morning and hear this amazing story. And if you're a woman out there who has a compelling story that you'd like to share about the work you're doing in your community, we would love to hear from you. I'm Bonnie McDaniel here with Ludy Green of Second Chances, and I'll see you on the flip side.